Okay, good morning. I'm Mark,
And I'm Eric.
and we want to get back into the swing after a couple of years of
Absence.
sabbatical, I guess, or
We put the bad in sabbatical.
yeah, we did. You'd be surprised.
Yeah.
So, welcome back, my friend.
Yes, welcome back. So Mark and I were talking about what we were doing prior to COVID and prior to our rather lengthy hiatus from this channel. And one of the things that initially motivated us was the topic of how to deal with one's aging parents, right? Because both Mark and I are definitely dealing with that. I think it's a topic that's germane to a lot of people's lives, although you don't hear a lot about it. So we thought we'd revisit that topic in light of the fact that we both have 2 more years of experience in dealing with increasingly elderly parents, although we ourselves are growing increasingly elderly too. And hopefully we have a couple more insights about that process for you and for ourselves too as we explore it together.
Well, and we, our circumstances have changed, both for you with your mom,
Yeah.
and for me with my in-laws and my parents. The most significant thing for me probably has been that they live with us now. We made accommodations for them when we built a new house recently, a couple of years ago. And so they're living with us. And then last August, it was actually July 30th last year, my dad had a stroke, from which he actually recovered from surprisingly well. But those are 2 things for myself that have presented some significant challenges because he can't drive anymore and so forth. So
Driving is a pivotal issue a lot of the time.
Well, my father-in-law asked me a few years ago, and it's probably in the other video, so my apologies if I repeat anything I said before, but I've slept since we did that other one 2 years ago. He said, "What do you suppose is elderly people's biggest concern?" And after we talked for a while, it became clear that for most elderly people, the biggest concern is not a loss of memory, which I thought probably would be the case, but it's a loss of independence.
Yeah. And probably concomitantly feeling like a burden, perhaps, on the people around, and not wanting to feel that way and feeling bad about that.
And that is an ongoing topic, sometimes several times a week, feeling like they don't want to feel like they're in the way. They don't want to feel like a burden. They don't want to feel like they're an imposition. And the only good way we can respond to that, I found, is just by encouraging them that that's not the case and trying to involve them as much as possible in doing just routine stuff to keep them active and engaged.
I think that's a critical piece of the puzzle. It's an adage, I guess, that use it or lose it, right? So, and that applies to your physical capacities and your mental capacities and probably other social capacities and probably across the board. It's a truism across the board. And so I think inviting the people we love who are elderly to engage as much as possible, it probably makes the process easier.
Well, and I think that doing that helps them retain a sense of value.
Yes.
And not only for them, but for us too. There's not a taking for granted that they're just down the hall.
Yeah, I think, Mark, that's very important, that sense of value, because, the whole issue of being a burden and an encumbrance, I think only becomes really important insofar as a sense of perhaps valuelessness rides alongside it. So if someone feels like they're contributing something valuable to the people's lives around them, then it's a lot easier to deal with the sensation of needing to be taken care of, because there's a quid pro quo going on, right? There's a give and take going on.
And that's tied into the relational aspects of being not only family, but being together as family. But now there's another thing. One of the things that actually prompted me to contact Eric to want to restart doing videos, but also to do this one in particular, is my own feelings that I have had over the last year or two since we did the last video on this, of because I am an only child.
And I am too.
Yeah.
Not originally, but I'm the last survivor.
Yeah. So it's a feeling of I have no siblings to help, which, a lot of people are in that boat, but I also don't have any children of my own. So there are moments when I'm alone, usually in a quiet moment alone, of just reminiscing and thinking about the past, which takes me into considering the future of when I will be in a situation like this, and what kind of options and planning should I consider now, because that might be a couple of years, it might be 20 years, it might be 20 days. I mean, one never knows when, you could become incapacitated for 1,000 different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And it can happen at a younger age, or I may be fine and healthy and able to care for myself till I'm 90. But I don't know.
But I think, Mark, that part of what's happening probably for both of us is that as we ourselves are getting older, the body announces itself much more frequently and much more often, and it's much easier to become very aware of the fragility of our lives and the fragility of our physical well-being and how unpredictable it is, and to feel the inevitable effects of entropy over time. And that odds are you may exercise and you may slow that process down, but eventually that process is going to win. There are no two ways about it. Entropy wins in the end, most obviously in the form of mortality, but for most of us a period of debilitation before that. And so if you're an only child like I am, and I know that you have stepchildren, as do I, you have a spouse, as do I, but I think part of the reason why this is an issue, I think, for both of us, and maybe for some of you watching this video too, is the question of who's going to take care of us if the answer is not immediately obvious in the form of children by blood. Because the fact of the matter is, the easy answer of, my spouse will take care of me if something bad happens. Well, the fact of the matter is, you or I or anyone else might outlive our spouses, and so that doesn't really solve the problem. That's really just sort of a kind of we have a third party who wants to contribute something from the quadruped's point of view, I think. That's not really a solution to the problem. That's just sort of a way of I got dog distracted there.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's just a way of assuaging our anxiety.
It's a mental distraction.
Yeah.
It's a physical reality that could happen.
Exactly.
Especially when spouses are close to the same age.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I've noticed too, is in the last 2 years, just more aware maybe of, because of this, of my own aches and pains and
Yeah.
Oh, well, something doesn't feel right here, my back hurts, or, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of extrapolate that out.
Yes. And it doesn't take, I think, a lot of rocket science intellectual capability to do that and to sort of see where the progression is heading. So, and the fact is, I think that this is actually an issue for a lot more people than just people who are either only children or the last survivors or people like that, because you never know how life is going to play out. Like, you might get alienated from your children. They might end up being unwilling to take care of you.
and along with that is the feeling of not wanting to encumber them
Right.
in the first place.
Yes, exactly. So that whole business of feeling like a burden, and like, are our contributions to their lives, do they have enough value that we would be willing to be to receive?
Speaks to that idea of value that we were talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And so, the probably the nightmarish question is, what are we going to do if it plays out that way? Like, how are we going to handle that if it plays out that way? So, I mean, it's a kind of trope, I guess, in our Western world, that one of the great tragedies of senescence, fancy vocabulary word, the state of getting older, senescence.
Today's word.
Yeah, that's the word of today, is to die alone or to die lonely.
And the AARP, and their erudite wisdom, and they have coined a phrase. I think they're the ones that came up with it. Adult orphans.
Yeah, adult orphans.
What they call that.
Right. So adult orphan is someone who has probably become elderly and has no sort of familial caretaking capacity, in much the same way that a child who is orphaned has no one to take care of him or her. Right. Well, the same thing can happen in the second childhood, as Shakespeare put it. Right. That you're sort of becoming, in a way, regressing back again, like Shakespeare put it, to second childhood, and yet there's no one to take care of us or you or whoever it happens to be. So the question is, how are we going to deal with that? Well, when you're an adult, unlike when you're a kid, you probably have some financial means, and consequently can pay for some measure of caretaking, which provides at least a partial solution for people that have sort of lined their ducks up in a row for retirement and the winter of their lives, But not everyone does that, of course. And even if you have done that successfully, it's like, well, okay, so you're being taken care of physically, but what about all the other dimensions of your life?
Because the old cliche of being set in your ways really is a thing.
Yeah.
And if one can go into old age already mentally have been prepared to be adaptable, to be flexible.
Oh boy, yeah, that's a big challenge, to remain adaptable. I know that my own mother, who's 94 at this point, and who lives in town here in Carrollton, not where I live, she has her own place, it seems so obvious that that's a big challenge for her, is adaptability, like being able to adapt herself not merely to how the world is changing, but more importantly to how she herself is changing over time. So an adaptability to the new realities. Yeah. And of course, what gets in the way of that is a kind of resistance, right? So the other side of the equation is a resistance to how things are changing. And the thing about that, what powers that, I think, at the emotional level, is a desire for things to be as they were in the past, to retain the adult powers and capabilities and intellectual agility and physical well-being. So it's really, I think, what's at the root of the challenge of adaptability is to let go of the longing to feel like things have not changed, right?
And the idea that the agency is not there.
Yes,
like it was.
The agency. Yeah, that's a good point. That part of what dissolves in the ocean of time that surrounds us is our sense of being capable. But being capable is it's important in any number of ways. But I think the sense that we are capable agents in the world, that we are adults and not merely entering into a second childhood, but that we are still full-fledged adults. That's the nostalgia for the days when we really were full-fledged adults with adult powers and all the capabilities and all of that kind of stuff. But the reality is that for all of us, eventually, it's just a matter of time that that's not going to be the case.
Well, and you had your own struggles with these changes since we did 2 years ago, since we did the first video. With your mom not driving anymore, that was a multi-year effort on your part.
It was, and it was a struggle. It was a big struggle. In fact, I would say it's been so far the biggest struggle in taking care of her, because what was happening was she was, first of all, she lost her license. Why did she lose her license? Because when it came time for renewal, she had cataracts that she refused to get surgery on, and she couldn't see well enough to pass the eye chart test at the Motor Vehicle Bureau. So as a consequence, she didn't have a license. Well, for a while, she was driving around illegally because she didn't have a license, but more to the point, she was driving around with these cataracts in her eyes that made her semi-blind. So she was like she was a disaster waiting to happen on the roads. And so both for herself and for other people too. So it was a tremendous struggle to get that car away from her so that she couldn't drive illegally. Well, it turned out that one day she received the insurance bill. And when she received the insurance bill, I happened to be there, and she got all pissed off about how much she was paying for insurance. And then in a fit of pique, said, "You just take the car and take the insurance bills." And I said, okay.
Yeah,
and it's a deal. And I ran down. It was actually New Year's Day when this happened, so I couldn't run down to the Motor Vehicle Bureau. But as soon as they opened up on January the 2nd, I was down there registering the car and changing the insurance, because once she gave me the in to get that car away from her, I wasn't going to let her change her mind about it, because she wasn't going to get the operation. She was going to continue driving illegally, and it was just a matter of time before she either did herself in or did someone else in, and it was going to end in catastrophe. But the cool part about that is that once the car went away, and this was right before COVID happened, a couple months before COVID happened, and everyone went into lockdown, like things settled down a whole lot. Once she got used to the idea that I was taking care of her and
groceries and
right, exactly, getting her supplies and making sure that she didn't run out and all of that, like she settled down quite a bit. And the way I made sense of it was that as we go backwards in time, and I'm going to take Shakespeare's sort of paradigm for that, like the second childhood, there's also a second adolescence, right? So she, in the driving, which oddly enough is a big issue during our first adolescence, driving. Well, in the second adolescence, she was, of course, very rebellious, like adolescents often are, and defiant, again, as adolescents often are, and sort of, refusing to sort of listen to sense, as adolescents often do. And but once she got through that and sort of regressed to an even earlier phase, like pre-adolescence, then things got a lot easier. So when she sort of, if you're sort of following this metaphor, like going backwards in time, when she sort of reached like maybe let's say 12 years old or the equivalent of 12 years old, then it became obvious that I was the caretaker and that she was the caretakee. And that sort of hard line, that sort of definitive line, made a lot of the contention go away. Once she had no choice but to accept her role as you're the one going to be receiving the care and I'm going to be the one giving the care, and that everyone's roles sort of, they weren't in this state of ambiguity anymore. That settled out a lot of the conflict for me.
So there was if you look at it as a continuum, there was this sort of a catharsis that happened at a point there. Or I guess you could look at it in a cyclical way too, of coming back around to adolescence, but that there's a point at which, like a homeostasis kind of, the waves settle down into, okay, this is the new routine. This is the new
routine. And the other sort of oddness of my story is that prior to COVID, she actually got shingles. Now, the thing about shingles is you can't really go around in public with that because it's a viral condition and it's possible to infect other people with that, especially if they have not had chickenpox in the past. It's a variation or an adult version of chickenpox, basically. So you can really lay someone down with that. Well, so she had to be in quarantine before the COVID quarantine. So her quarantine started a few months before that, and then COVID hit right as she was getting over the shingles. So she went from one lockdown right into the next lockdown. And you may think that, oh, I bet that was hell. It wasn't hell. It wasn't hell at all, because, and I'm not sure what to attribute this to, but it may be sort of the regressive thing. It's like one thing I've noticed about aging is our worlds tend to get smaller with time. Right? So like when I was young, I was traveling all over and going to the West Coast a lot and going to other countries on occasion and that sort of thing. And my world, as a 61-year-old, that's how old I am now, is basically Northwest Georgia, kind of. Her world as a 94-year-old is basically her house where she lives.
Yeah.
And
for my dad specifically, it's the route from his bedroom up the hall to the kitchen.
Yeah.
Or from his bedroom into his bathroom. That is his world.
Yeah.
And maybe the occasional day when they both, mom and dad both sit out on the patio for after lunch or something. So, well, if I had to, because I guess we could go on and on with our anecdotal stuff here, but if I had to really put this down into a word for myself for help, it would be either adaptability or flexibility. One of those two words.
I think that's not a bad way of characterizing the center of the struggle. And maybe it's more obvious that the struggle of adaptability applies to our parents, but it's also an issue for us too, because we who are caretaking also have to be adaptable to the changing reality of the relationships and physical states of physical debilitation, both on their part, more obviously, and to a lesser extent on our part too. Part of how the reality has changed for me is I've retired once COVID hit the university systems, and there was a lot of financial upheaval and structural changes within the university system. So I retired at that point because I just barely turned 60 and therefore barely qualified for early retirement. And so I took advantage of that. And so I'm adapting to that reality too. So it's a different world, speaking of value, it prompts you to question sort of the value of your continuing existence, because you don't have that easy answer of, well, I go to work and I teach the next generation, and I have whatever 400 students every year, which is about what I would have every year, and that sort of confers on my life a certain value. Well, when that answer isn't there, the question of value and burdensomeness potentially begins to sort of rise up. And so I think it's adaptability. I agree with you, Mark, that man, that's a key thing.
Well, and the way that I do that for myself is I have sort of made it almost a routine or ritual kind of way of being with them. And what I mean is try to make it as absolutely routine as I can, just like you would look both ways before you cross a road. Mm-hmm. Is there any scenario in which you could imagine yourself on a normal situation not to look both ways before you cross a road? You just do. Mm-hmm. So my every interaction with them, especially with my dad, now is of making that top of mind awareness of being flexible for myself for whatever I'm going to face when I knock on his door to ask him a question, or if he's called me for something or whatever. Yeah. As though I have, and it's sort of like being on the fire department when you got a call or a page, and you go. Maybe it says it's a one vehicle accident. Okay, well, you can't have in your mind, okay, well, it's this one car fender bender, because the one vehicle, maybe it's a school bus with 30 children on it. Mm-hmm. Well, see, that completely changes the scenario all of a sudden. Rather than holding in your mind, I could face anything when I get there. Yeah. And the more I can make myself do that as a matter of routine, the less anxiety I feel during the course of the day.
Well, that's understandable, because if you have a decent capability that way, then the idea that you can handle whatever crops up is an easy one. The other thing that I like about what you're saying is that I think you're implying, or maybe you're just saying it outright, I'm not sure, that adaptability, a little bit like any other capacity, use it or lose it.
Yeah.
Right. So one of the questions hanging in the air is like, how can we ourselves retain or perhaps even increase our adaptability so that when we enter into senescence, there's your new vocabulary word, we do so with as much grace and as much dignity as possible, And I think the answer to that, it's probably a complex question, but one answer is to practice along the way, along the steps leading to senescence, adaptability, and to make it, number it among, I guess I would even say, the spiritual goals of our lives. I would say that adaptability is not merely a practical goal. I would say that it runs deeply enough into the terrain of our being that I would use the word spiritual to describe it. So adaptability to me is perhaps first and foremost a spiritual attribute, and only then does it become, emotional and practical and so on. But let's see, how are we doing on time, Mark?
I think we've probably taken enough of their time for today. We're coming up on almost 30 minutes.
Oh, we are. Okay, yeah. You're keeping track. So now you're 30 minutes older. So you're 30 minutes closer to all of the issues
So you figure out your own path for incorporating flexibility and adaptability.
Yeah, I guess that's the nugget of wisdom that we've come to at the end of this one.
Yeah, so more questions than answers,
but hey, that's life. Life is more questions than answers, because every answer we come to is really just setting the stage for the next question, if you think about it.
So we will hopefully pick this up again with a different topic sooner than later. Maybe we won't go 2 years this time.
Yeah, maybe we won't go 2 years. So
thank you very much.
At any rate, for watching. Thank you very much for watching. We hope you have a great day.
We'll see you next time.
Take care of yourselves.